So let's begin with a bow. And welcome everyone to New York Buddha Dharma. See some familiar faces and some new ones. Everybody's welcome. So tonight, the reading is on meditation. Two readings. And this talk is going to be somewhat disorganized because I'm going to follow the readings. I haven't reorganized the material, and each one of them hits some different points. And they're not particularly, it's not like talking about the 5 skandhas or the 6 realms where the material organizes itself. Rather, these are insights into meditation practice. In the first reading, Touch and Go, he talks about attitude. He says, you're aware that you're aware. And what that means is that it's kind of like, when you wake up in the morning and realize that you were having a dream, but you're not anymore. You know you're not dreaming. You're aware. Just right now, we can be very cognizant of when we're simply here. We're aware. We're awake of this to this present moment. And this is important because in mindfulness, that's what we're doing. We're coming back to this simple awareness in the present moment. That's what mindfulness is. Coming back from dream. In the practice of meditation, we use the breath to work with mindfulness. Why? Because the breath is very immediate. You can feel it as it exits your nostrils or comes in. If you're working with the in-breath, we're not, but you could be with shamatha. And the breath only takes place one place, in the present moment. Doesn't happen in the past, doesn't happen in the future, it happens now. So the breath helps us to be aware that we're aware. You're thinking, and then you realize, I've lost track of the breath. And you come back and you feel the breath leaving your nostrils, and you're back. This is a practice that we can do all the time, not only on the cushion, but as we walk down the street. We realize that we were dreaming. We're off in Timbuktu, doing whatever we were going to do, and then now we're back, and we are at Broadway and 42nd Street, the epicenter of the world as it used to be. Kind of quiet there now, I think. Or wherever you may be. So this is mindfulness. And he talks about how you touch and go. And what that means is, in order to make this a sane rather than a neurotic activity. See, it becomes neurotic if you touch it, if you come back, you see this awareness, and then you try and hold on to it. Because you can't. And as soon as you try to hold on to it, you've got some ulterior motive, you've got some goal in mind, and you're not quite here anymore. You're thinking about, gee, if only I can hold on to it, then I might be really aware, or I might even get enlightened. And then, darn it, I can't hold on to it. So you don't do that. Rather, you come back, here we are, and then you let it go. You just completely let it go. No holding on. It's like you give up any kind of self-aggrandizement around this awareness. You touch it, you say, here I am, awake, and then you just let go into whatever, and then do it again at some point, whenever you realize that you've been dreaming, and then you come back. So this is what's meant by touch and go, is you touch the awareness, coming back out of dream. You know that you're now aware. It's effortless, that awareness. And then you let go. That carelessness is so important in meditation. It's like a freedom, a carelessness. Later in one of these two readings, he talks about the term great bliss, mahasukha. And it's not this great bliss that is one experiences at some point in one's practice. And it's not the bliss or the happiness of some kind of orgasm, or like eating chocolate cake or having sex or whatever it might be. What it is freedom from compulsion. That's the great bliss. You can actually be free to do whatever, to be here, to not be here, and then you come back again if you've gone off. And there's this quality of freedom. You touch, that's coming back, and then you let it go. That quality of freedom is so important. It's what makes your practice enjoyable. And also, you begin to develop confidence, a tremendous confidence that actually you are awake. You can do this. You can come back and you can touch awakeness. And then that carefree, letting go, not caring anymore, is so important. If I make it important, then you'll think, well, I got to hold on to that. That's how our minds often work. But it's the carefreeness of it. Touch and go. He says, you are there, you are sitting. You are there, you are sitting. That's the touch part. The go part is that you are there and then you don't hang onto it. You don't sustain your sense of being, but you let go of it. And you feel a touch of individuality. He says, you feel yourself as a person. We are here, we exist, and we're unique. Each one of us has our own particular qualities that come out in your thoughts. That's why you also don't do this with thought. You don't try and get rid of thought. Rather, you might take an interest. That's your unique individuality, those particular thoughts. It's the way in which you go off into dream, and each one of us is different. And if you constantly are trying to get rid of those, you don't really see them. You don't have any appreciation for who you are, for your sort of neurotic self, which is very worth appreciating. There's a kindness in that. And it's also interesting. And when you appreciate that, your neurotic self, the way your mind thinks, there's that carefree quality of letting go of ambition, that you're just willing to see it. And that's different than dreaming it. When you dream it, we're unconscious. We're in the dream. We're like sleepwalkers, dreaming. But the instant you see your thoughts, you're no longer dreaming. You're seeing the thoughts, you're back, you're awake. And this applies to how we work with emotions. You don't repress them. You see, the normal attitude towards emotions is that we're trying to get rid of them. They're painful. You have this desire for something and it's unfulfilled and you so want to fulfill it. You have this anger towards somebody and it's just burning inside you. You feel beneath the anger, you feel hurt and that pain, you want to get rid of it. And so we try and get rid of the emotions in one of two ways, or maybe both ways. We either try and get rid of them, we repress them, or we divert our attention to something else. So we try and direct our minds away from them. Or else, that's one way of getting rid of them. Repressing them, diverting our attention is another form of repression. Go to a movie so you don't have to think about how you've been hurt in your anger. Turn on the TV. And the second way is that we act them out. You punch somebody in the nose, you call them a name, you get revenge. Either way, we're trying to get rid of the emotions. And what this is saying is don't do that. Don't get rid of them. See them. See them with some interest. See them as arisings in the mind and how they play out. The sad thing is, in a way, or the odd sad, is that when you take that attitude toward the emotions, they do go away. They sort of fly away because emotions are sustained by the stories we tell. That's so-and-so, they shouldn't have said that to me, I'll get even with them, blah, 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 blah. And as soon as you see it, you come back and see it, you're not lost in that dream anymore. And eventually, probably pretty soon, it starts to evaporate. The story evaporates until all that's left is the feeling. And then the feeling goes. That energetic feeling. So the instruction is the same. See it. Embrace it. Embrace it. That doesn't mean that you jump into it and roll around in it. It means that you actually take an interest or a curiosity in it and just see it with great respect, as it were. Interest. And then it goes. It just does. That's what they do. Because all thoughts and emotions are just big thoughts. They're not different in kind, fundamentally, from thoughts about what's for lunch. It's just got more emotion in it. When you think, what's for lunch, there's that little bit of desire. Hope it's going to be a good lunch. It'll be yummy when I get it in my tummy. So there's always that little bit of emotion connected with even the simplest of thoughts. Even if you're doing math, there's the pleasure of thinking, I'm going to conquer this. Or the dismay of thinking, I can't do this. So always, we just see it. He says, of the emotions, if you feel that sitting and meditating, coming back to the breath, is a way of avoiding problems, that is the problem. Then you're using meditation as an escape. And that way, that'll go on forever. It's just endless. And it's tortuous. And it's neurotic. And it's self-punishing. And it doesn't end. Isn't that powerful? If you think, he says, I'm just going to repeat it. All those thoughts and feelings happen, and you experience them. You look at them, and only then do you come back to your breath. You look at them, and only then do you come back to the breath. You get a good look. What's going on in my mind? Ooh, that's interesting, I'm having this revenge fantasy, and you can just see it. And when you see it that way, it loses its grip on you. It loses its ability to terrorize you and make you feel bad. And it becomes an object of interest. Otherwise, there is the possibility that we could twist the logic all around. If you feel that sitting and meditating, coming back to the breath, is a way of avoiding problems, that is the problem. And he's addressing here the approach to meditation that says, I'm going to achieve a kind of peace. I'm going to achieve an escape from the world by sitting down and meditating from my problems. Now, even when you do this kind of practice, there is a peace that is produced, but it's a byproduct. It happens willy-nilly. And it's a slightly different kind of peace. It's not the kind of peace of being narcotized, which when you focus your mind one-pointedly on an object, that is a kind of narcotic. The peace here is the peace of giving up struggle with yourself and of being willing to see everything that's arising and passing away in your mind with interest. If we talk about nothing else but this in this tonight, I would regard it as a huge success. This is the work, if we can call it that. And in it, we begin to be so kind to ourselves that we let ourselves be who and what we are in the moment, which might not be what we, as much as we would like. We'd like to be glorioso, you know. We'd like to be somebody that people, you know, put billboards up for. And this might be much more humble, but it's free from that self-criticism. He says, in fact, most of the problems in life do not arise because you are an aggressive or lustful person. That's what we think. You know, we think I've got all these nasty neuroses inside me that make me bad. The greatest problem is that you want to bottle those things up and put them aside or patch over them. And you have become an expert in deception, in covering over all these things that are going over inside you. That is the biggest problem. Meditation practice is supposed to uncover any attempts to develop a subtle, sophisticated, deceptive approach, like I'm going to be holy. See, what he's addressing is that, especially in the time that when he was here in the West, the prevalence of using meditation as a narcotic, as though if you could go off into a trance state and you would levitate and achieve orgasmic bliss, was the promise. And he's attacking that. Then how do we work with the breath? Well, first of all, there's shamatha practice, which is just focusing on the breath. But we're beyond that now. We're working with the environment as well, the space, awareness. You see, that coming back to that precision of being aware in the present moment of that sensation as the breath exits your nose and the nostrils, that's the shamatha. And then watching the breath go out, that's the shamatha. But the space, the fact that we are aware of our environment, that's the vipassana. So what we practice is a kind of hybrid that Trungpa Rinpoche taught. He felt that Westerners didn't really need much shamatha, maybe a little bit in the beginning. Just there are three virtues to shamatha practice, pure shamatha. That's where you sit and you focus your mind one-pointedly on an object. Could be the breath, going in and out and in and out. Could be a statue in front of you. Could be a candle flame, but you're focusing your mind one-pointedly on that. And whenever you realize that you've gone off in thought, you come back to that object. And if you get really, 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 really good at it, you can achieve a kind of trance state. But those trance states, they're called the dhyanas, take enormous work. Enormous. And they're dangerous. They're dangerous. Why? Because they're pleasurable and they're cul-de-sacs. They're dead ends. Eventually, they dissolve and you're back where you started, except you could be very disillusioned and angry at having wasted so much time. And that disillusionment and anger can plunge you into a very negative state of mind. But there are three advantages to shamatha. And that's why we do it a little bit. Maybe when you first come to the path, you practice some shamatha. The three advantages are, one, that one becomes aware of monkey mind, the extent to which we're lost in thought all the time. I mean, most people just walk around constantly thinking. We do that too, even after we've been meditating for 50 years. But they don't know it. They've given their loyalty so much to thought that they don't see that there's any alternative. The second advantage, besides becoming aware of that, is that you begin to learn how to focus your mind in awareness. And the third advantage is that you actually do get some peace, because thought is full of struggle, anxiety. wishing things were otherwise. That's the fundamental quality of thought. It's dukkha, suffering. And so when we come back to awareness, whenever you come back to awareness in the present moment, there's a freedom from that anxiety of the thought. But then it's very limited. And beyond that, we have to go into vipassana, which is a spatial awareness, that all of this is taking place here and now within this space. The space, as you see, it's not an actual physical thing, space. You can't hold it. You can't point to it. You can't find it. What space is the great accommodator. It allows these appearances, like these sounds that are coming out of this mouth, these gestures that are appearing and passing away, bodily sensations, the six knowables, tastes, smells, and mental events. All of these things arise and pass away in the present moment, in space. Space is what gives birth to them, and as they are giving birth, they're already dying, and they're passing away back into the space. So space is the womb, and it's the graveyard. In Indian lore, they call it the charnel ground, because most people in India weren't wealthy enough to afford being cremated and having their ashes scattered. And so their bodies were carted out, many, many people, into charnel grounds where they were left for animals to eat. And great yogis would go and meditate there because the inspiration of this horror of these half-eaten bodies would inspire them to practice rather than seek worldly pleasures. So this space that we meditate in, it's this here, now, all the time. We come back to it, we let our awareness, and here's the thing about space. It is in unity with knowing. It's not an I know the object proposition. That's a myth. That's an error. That's a mental construct. What we actually experience beyond thought is this space, and this space is lit, permeated with knowingness. Knowingness, they call it in the teachings, they say it's self-known. It's what allows us to know that we're awake when we're awake. I was dreaming, now I'm back. That's that knowingness. It's objectless and subjectless. And so we constantly come back to this space in our meditation practice, and we are aware of the breath as it exits our nostrils. This is the shamatha aspect. Vipassana is the space. Rinpoche used to say, you give, figuratively speaking, you give 80% of your awareness to the space, 20% to the breath in this hybrid practice. It's figurative. It just means that it's like watching, I think of it as like, you've taken your finger and drawn a line on water, and as the finger moves across the water is healing behind it, and the line is dissolving back into the water. The breath comes up, you can feel it as it leaves your nostrils, and it goes out into space, making a line. And that line, it's dissolving in the space, just like that line on water. And your awareness is here. Sorry. Person who does that all the time, they know that we're having class tonight and they do that. So the breath goes out, it dissolves into the space, which is what it does, just like these words are dissolving. And then you are just here, except there's no you, there's just here. So the whole idea is, it's hard to describe in words because words are dualistic. That's what they are. That's why it's hard to describe it. In the teachings, they say that words are just useful ways to take things. They are relative truth, not absolute truth. Absolute truth is indescribable. It's just this. You can point to this and this and this aspect of it. It's endless. Relative truth is the words, and words are useful at a particular time and place. They're very partial. And what these words say is, be one with the breath. What does that mean? That means you give up the watcher. The watcher is this guy or girl who's sitting on your shoulder and saying, now you're getting it. No, 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 not that way. Do it this way. That's good. This is bad. Oh, you're totally fucked up. You'll never get it. That's what the watcher says. Or, wow, you're really getting it. People are going to start putting your name in newspapers. The watcher is constantly doing that. It's all about good and bad, praise and blame, should and shouldn't. And what we're doing is we're letting go of the watcher. We're just doing it. The breath goes out, dissolves, space. Giving up that extraneous comment. So one way of describing it, which he does in these teachings, is he says, you become one with the breath. One other thing here I just noticed he says about the emotions, going back to them, we label them, thinking. This is a technique. You can do it or not, if you find it helpful to come back. You label it thinking. Now, when you do that, there should be no value attached to it. No slamming the thought, no praising yourself for coming back. That can be very subtle in there. It's just sort of a very mechanical device to wake up from the thought and come back to awareness of the breath and the space. He talks about group retreat. And we're going to do a group retreat for those of you who wish on the 23rd of the month. We're going to have a virtual one-day group retreat on Zoom. We'll sit and have walking meditation and sitting, and we're going to do a lot of Tonglen. I feel Tonglen is particularly useful and valuable now, during the time of the virus. Because the interesting thing is it's a compassion practice for other people. That's what Tonglen is, right? You're taking in their suffering and sending out release from suffering and happiness and confidence. But the weird thing is, it really works for you. When you do Tonglen for another person, it has a very powerful effect on oneself. And in fact, a very powerful way for those of you who are already doing Tonglen, a way to do it, is to do it for yourself. To breathe in your own suffering. Take it in through the pores of your body and your lungs. You're suffering, you're wishing things were otherwise. We're not taking in a physical disease. We're taking in the mental attitude around it of wanting it to not to be there. And you breathe in, because that's the suffering. And then you breathe out fearlessness, confidence, cheer. They're great stories, wonderful stories about people who've achieved great realization, going cheerfully into their own deaths with curiosity and cheer and confidence. So when you breathe in your own fear and your own sadness and sorrow, and you breathe out to yourself confidence and cheer, and then you can see it, you can feel what it is in yourself. Both of those aspects. And then it's very much easier to turn it around and do it for someone else, to send them the same cheer that you were sending yourself, to take in from them the same suffering that you identified in yourself. So we're going to do some Tonglen on the 23rd. So appropriate in this particular time. More and more, as the longer this thing goes on, the more and more all of us know people who have suffered from the virus and other things, and even died. I'm sure there are people in this group who have people close to them who have passed away. So he talks about group practice and all the different kind of escapes that we can do when we're doing those practices. One of them has to do with lunch. That when you have lunch, you sort of think, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to meditate now. I can actually enjoy eating some lunch. And you're getting a vacation. And you shouldn't do that. Bring your awareness to the lunch too. Because then you turn sitting on the cushion and being aware into a villain, into a bad thing that you have to go back to. Oh my gosh, poor me. Create this polarity. When we used to do these practices, you see, Trungpa Rinpoche was very inspired. The Tibetans don't do these all-day practices like this. They just sit forever, But they don't do these formal practices of sitting and walking and bells ringing and all that. But Rinpoche went to Tassajara in about 1971 and saw them doing sesshin there, and he loved it. He thought, this is terrific. So he adapted it and made it into what in his lineage, in his tradition here in the United States, we called Datun. Datun means month-long sitting practice because sesshins are a month. And then we have week tuns because not everybody could come and sit for a month, so we would break them up into weeks. And now we're having a day tun on Saturday. We'll just sit from the morning from 10 to 12:30, and then 10 to 1, and then 2 to 5. Alternate periods of sitting and walking. There'll be a talk. There'll be some Tonglen practice. We may do some group discussions in breakouts. We can do breakouts in Zoom. And then at 5 o'clock, we'll have drinks. We'll have virtual cocktails if anybody wants to do that, or dinner even, who knows. So then the second reading, he talks about how meditation, the technique of working with the breath, is kind of a feeble credential. Eventually, you're going to let it go. You're just going to rest in space and awareness. It's he calls it, this is the fool. Why he calls it a fool? You're sort of an idiot. You have to make fun of yourself. You're doing this silly thing. You're sitting on a cushion and watching your breath. You're playing Mumbledy-Peg or, whatever, who knows. And eventually it's like, what do they say about, when I was a child, I played with child's things, and now that I'm an adult, I put them away in the Bible. This is what happens when you grow up and awareness becomes a part of you. When you begin to realize how easy it is, especially when we stop making it into a goal, then it becomes more and more a part of us. What makes it seem distant and occasional is when we value it so much and we're so hard on ourselves for falling away from it. But if you get carefree about it, then it comes much more easily and often, both when you're sitting on the cushion and in daily life. To be carefree about it. He talks about simplicity. Here it is again. Just what I've been saying. I'm just echoing. Meditation practice is based on dropping the struggle of good against bad. Please, we're so addicted to it. And then he talks about great joy, mahasukha. He says, joy here is not pleasurable in the ordinary sense, but it is an ultimate and fundamental sense of freedom, a sense of humor, the ability to see the ironical aspects of the game of ego. And then he talks about, you do not try to use meditation techniques, prayer, mantra, visualization, rituals, breathing techniques to create pleasure or to confirm your existence. You do not try to separate yourself from the technique, but you try to become the technique so that there is a sense of non-duality. That's the thing of letting go of the watcher. becoming the breath. The breath goes out, dissolves, that's it. No comment. He says, and this is just repeating it, so meditation in the beginning is not an attempt to achieve happiness, nor is it the attempt to achieve mental calm or peace, though they could be byproducts of meditation. One begins to appreciate more and more the beauty of simplicity, the simplicity of the breath going out, dissolving into the space, and then there's just this. It's so simple. You actually do things for the first time completely. There's no watcher. And then he says you need to combine your sitting practice with awareness practice in everyday life, every situation of life, anything. You can come back, see it. And he says, if a person is able to perceive the simplicity as it is, then meditation becomes 24 hours a day. One begins to experience a tremendous sense of space because one does not have to watch oneself in a very heavy-handed way. You're willing to be a fool. That's a slogan. You can write that on your refrigerator. Willing to be a fool, willing to make mistakes all the time. Not afraid to be a fool. That's a slogan that he taught us. These chapters are so rich with just, it's like he's finger painting a picture of meditation. The word for mindfulness well, the word for awareness is smriti, S-M-R-T-I, S-M-R-I-T-I, depending on how it's transliterated, which literally means, he says it means recollection, recognition. It's also sometimes translated as remembering, the quality of the mind that recollects, recollects. And he says not in the sense of remembering the past, but in the sense of recognizing the product of mindfulness, of coming back into this space. It's that kind of recollection, recollection, coming back. And mindfulness is the vanguard of awareness, and that's the end of that chapter. So we could have a discussion. I'm going to, I think what I'm going to ask is that you rather that you can unmute yourselves, raise your hand, I'll just call your name, and let's have a discussion.
Hi, John.
Who is it?
It's Joe.
Hey, Joe.
So something just occurred to me just now. I mean, what's the difference between mindfulness, me come back, me recollect, and self-consciousness? It's both a sense of I.
With self-consciousness, there's definitely a sense of I. And there's a watcher who's watching you.
Right.
You can say, don't do this. And then you start to feel like you're, like a robot, moving jerkily. Mindfulness is simply coming back from dream.
Right.
We're having a dream, a thought. Might have been a thought about meditation.
Yeah. Well, what made me wonder that was when you said me recollect.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe I was overthinking it.
Maybe I was speaking sloppily.
I get it. I understand what you're saying now.
Yeah.
There's two different things. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I was thinking about this freedom. And recently, I've been doing some writing again. And it's actually going better. And the reason it's going better is that I'm not censoring myself. I'm not thinking, this isn't something I should be writing about. I don't like the way that was phrased. I'm just letting it rip. And the funny thing is, there's a quality of freedom to it. And this is what writing teachers always teach, by the way. They say the biggest enemy you've got and the biggest producer of writer's block, which I've had plenty of, is that you edit as you write. Don't do it. Just sit down and let it flow. And I've been doing that. And the funny thing is, not only is a lot coming out, but I feel really free. And it makes me feel nicer towards myself. It's the same thing as with meditation practice. Just let it rip. Just do it, and you don't censor yourself. Come back. You were thinking about this meal you had last night and how great it was and blah, blah, blah. And then you say, oh, I was off in a dream. Back, the breath goes out. Freedom. No censorship. No judgment. It's wonderful. It's a kindness to ourselves. And they talk about how important this is in the scriptures, and they call it developing compassion for yourself. And that's where compassion starts. We can do it right on the cushion by ceasing to censor and judge ourselves, our practice, as we meditate, and just letting it do, just doing it, coming back. Good meditator, bad meditator, who cares? Thanks for that comment, Joe.
Hey, John. It's CT.
Hi, CT.
How are you?
Good.
I had a question. So you were saying earlier that, when you come to the path, oftentimes you start with shamatha, and you sort of ended the talk with shamatha as sort of the vanguard of awareness, right, of vipassana. I'm curious, in your own practice, just in your own experience, in your own practice, I found as well that, I started with shamatha, more on the shamatha side, although I was usually doing shamatha vipassana hybrid, like Shambhala style. And then, but I do find that I go more directly to vipassana these days, once I sit down. And do you find that that is the case it has been the case for you? And when you meditate personally, and you're not teaching meditation, do you just sit down and practice vipassana, or do you do other meditations? What do you find yourself doing the most after many, many years of meditation?
I go back and forth. When I practice vipassana, pure vipassana, just resting awareness in space, I go off into dream a lot more. And when I do, then I'll come back to working with the breath, going out into the space. And when you go out and the breath goes out into the space, it's 80-20. And when the breath dissolves, it's pure vipassana. You're right here. Space. And I just let the chips fall where they may. Sometimes at night when I'm in bed, if I have trouble sleeping, it's because my mind is turning on thoughts, anxious thoughts. And so I'll practice shamatha. And it can be very difficult. It feels like I'm hardly able to watch my breath even for an instant, but it works. It's funny. And then I find that I wake up later and I was asleep. But I just do that's sort of using it as a tool. You know, I think that you practice shamatha to the extent that, shamatha vipassana. Once you've been meditating for a while, you don't need to be doing pure shamatha. Pure shamatha is when you're focused on the object, and if it's the breath, you're aware of the out breath going out, you're aware of the in breath going in, you count maybe even, you can even count. It goes out breath 1, in breath, out breath 2, in breath. The problem with shamatha is that because your awareness is coming into the body, it increases your awareness of I. And I is all about ambition, struggle. So shamatha has this quality of hard work going, that's the work of I. Whereas vipassana, especially if you're working with the out breath, which is what we do, right? When we work with the breath in space, we're going out with the breath. And then it's like touch and go. You go out with the breath, that's the touch. And the go is you let go, and that's the in breath. And so there's this constant giving out, a constant giving out of I and effort and just that whole ambition. The breath goes out, I goes out with it, I is it, and it dissolves. Emilio, get to you. Just want to see if there's any more to this with Carrie.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think that's it makes sense to me, and I like that. I like that explanation of, the difference between focusing on the out breath versus the in breath, and that quality of work that goes along with the focus, with the mindfulness of things. There is a quality of effort there that is not there in just resting in awareness, resting in the space.
In some places, they talk about shamatha taking place in the hridaya. Hridaya is the name for the mind-heart center in the center of your chest. And that this is where shamatha happens, whereas vipassana happens in space. Amelia.
Yeah, you said that you rest in awareness, but in touch and go, you don't rest in awareness. You don't entertain the awareness. You just come back to the technique. So, what is the difference? Is that one because one is shamatha and the other one is vipassana? Because you said two things that are in contradiction there. You said that you rest in awareness, and the other one you don't. You just don't do that. You just come.
Oh, and you can rest in awareness in vipassana too. It's awareness of the breath. You're not in a dream. You're not daydreaming about tomorrow or yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is that shamatha is very focused and ambitious. It's achievement oriented. I'm going to watch the breath for 7 times and then start over. And if you fail, if you find yourself, as you inevitably will, on 12, you just went right by 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then you have this feeling of, I failed, right? So there's this quality of ambition to shamatha and of self-discipline. With vipassana, it's resting in awareness, in space. So it's this quality of giving out, relaxing, letting go of self-judgment, of watching the self.
So is it in shamatha where you touch and go?
Actually, it's vipassana where you touch and go. The touch is you realize that you were dreaming, you're back in awareness with the breath going out. Well, you don't even work with the breath for pure vipassana. It's just awareness of this.
Mm.
and you realize that you were dreaming, you're back. The touch is realizing that you're back. And that going is then letting go of it, not trying to hold on to it, not trying to praise yourself, not trying to have any judgment around it, just let it go. And if it goes away, no problem. Then you can do it again. So you touch it, you come back, you say, yes, I'm aware now. And then you let go of it.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Graham, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, first, thank you very much for the talk. I really got so much out of it. But the thing that um, the um, the idea of awareness, um, it occurred to me from your talk that awareness is the experience of space, and the breathing is um, a way of interacting or dancing or playing with the essential space and the essential awareness. It's an elegant and simple way to dance with space. And I just appreciate that. It made me feel that I can actually rely on awareness as the essential experience that holds all other experiences for me. It's always already there. It's always there. It's there now while I'm talking, feeling the vibration of my voice, etc. And that the meditation is kind of like a workout room where you develop that awareness, and maybe you can carry it into other parts of your life as well with more gusto.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Tim. You're muted, Tim. Thanks.
So my experience elsewhere has been that shamatha is not taught in the Theravada tradition as ambition, but if I understood them correctly, it's taught as awareness, which is what I hear you saying. So that I'm aware that I'm off the breath and I come back to the breath. And they also say that it's an opportunity for self-kindness because I'm always going to go off the breath. And so at the moment that I'm back, that you described, I have the opportunity to be kind to myself and say, okay, I'm off the breath, back to zero. And then theoretically, if I'm able to offer myself that wiggle room or that, compassion, then I might be able to apply it in other situations where people are frustrating me or whatever, But they talk about it as like building a muscle. And they say the magic moment is when you realize that you're gone. And much of what I've heard them say resonates deeply with what I've heard you say. But they don't talk about the egoistic part about it. It's just, I'm off the breath, I'm back. I'm off the breath, I'm back. But at that moment, when I come back, I can make a choice about, as you say, I'm a crappy meditator, I'm never going to get this, or I'm off the breath and I'm back. And making good choices, I think, helps my days go by with a little bit less struggle. I don't know if that's an ambition, but I'm drawn to less struggle.
Yeah, that's me too. Yeah, absolutely. Well said. I think the fundamental difference between shamatha and vipassana is that you wouldn't want to practice shamatha while you're driving your car, but you could practice vipassana and it would make you a better driver.
That makes sense to me. Do you remember also when we were together that Chögyam Rinpoche said shamatha is not meditation?
Yeah.
It's a mental technique
Yeah.
to which you could, were one to sharpen that knife, one could use it for all kinds of useful tasks. but the other places that I've heard it also describe what you did, that it can become a place where one wants to go to hide out from everyday life.
Right.
And so if one is going to sharpen that knife, it's essential, they say, to be aware of that danger and maybe have a teacher or, you know, somebody to say, no, that's enough. It's time to move on or do something, I guess.
Thank you. We see, we're going to, Joe, come back to you in the
Yeah.
end. Okay.
I find that, you know, from experience, as far as awareness goes, it's something I haven't done in quite a while, and I really miss it, is walking meditation, because it really tunes you into awareness.
As
I
indeed.
find it much. It's not as much of a. It doesn't feel as like much of a task as sitting meditation goes with awareness and daydreaming.
Well, walking meditation is really shamatha vipassana.
Yeah.
Aware of the environment, and you're aware of not the breath, but the body.
Yeah, and the steps. Yeah.
Moving through it. And we're going to be doing it on the 23rd. You know, every morning, there's a group of people who meet for meditation on the same room, this, you know, that you're in now. And we sit, we on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we start at 8, and we have 15 minutes of conversation. And then we have an hour of practice, and then people continue to talk for another 15 minutes, or however long they want. And then on Saturday and Sunday, we start an hour, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we start an hour later. Every session, every 1 hour practice session has walking meditation in the middle. And then towards the end, we usually do a short Tonglen. And I also recommend short Tonglen. Tonglen is a very difficult practice to sustain. And I was reading Pema's book on Tonglen recently, which is quite good. And she says the same thing. It's just a hard practice. So 5 to 10 minutes of Tonglen is good. And so we're doing that. You can come in the morning. You have to get,
I have to try that out.
yeah, because we're doing walking every day. And
I'm picturing myself walking up and down my hallway.
well, I'm just walking in and around my apartment. You know,
Yeah.
Val and I just circle.
Yeah. I guess I'll have to do an L loop all around. Yeah.
Right. No, but it's great practice. It is willy-nilly. You cannot do it as shamatha practice.
Yeah.
Because you gotta be aware of your environment, not aware that expanded awareness is the vipassana element.
Thank you.
John, if I could respond to that really quickly, Joe, my body is also doesn't agree as much with sitting, and so walking really helps me a lot. But I was also talking to a younger friend on retreat once about walking back and forth instead of walking to actually go somewhere. And when an aversion to the tedium arises in my mind, it's useful to observe that and just keep turning around. I mean, my living room is 20 feet long, which is big for New York, but it's not like walking around the block, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I look forward to doing it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Leanne. You're muted. There you go. Did you want to say something? I thought you had your hand up earlier. I'm sorry. We're not hearing you for some reason. The mute is off. Hi. Can't hear you. Can you hear it? You must be able to. You might have there's a microphone. Sometimes, where is that thing? I can't see it on our screen. There's a way in which you can mute yourself. But no, then you'd be muted, and you're not muted.
She could also type in the chat, possibly.
You could do something in chat if you was rather hear your voice, but you click on the three dots and then you click on chat. No? Somehow your microphone isn't working. I don't know what kind of computer you're on, but you need to go to settings if you're on a Mac. I can't remember how to do it on a PC anymore. And check your sound.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Leanne put her question in the chat, I
She
think.
did. Chat. Oh, okay, I got it. All right. Relative and absolute shamatha vipassana. Huh. Well, is Leanne still here?
She followed up with, is there a connection?
Between relative and absolute and shamatha and vipassana. Well, vipassana is very much getting towards absolute truth. Absolute truth means this. We're sitting in the middle of it. And as soon as you, as soon as you describe it, like you take the word table, I got a table that I'm sitting on, right? Well, the table that I'm experiencing is multiform. It's got particular shape. It's got modeled colors. It has texture. It's got all that. Word table is what in Tibetan they call a tag. It's as though you took a piece of paper and wrote the word table on it and scotch taped it to this thing that my computer's resting on. And it's the same with all words. So all words are very, very one-dimensional, whereas our experience is infinitely dimensional. It just never ends, the dimensionality of it. And it's constantly changing. Whereas words don't change. Table is a table is a table, that word. The experience that it refers to can be very different. You've got a table in your place, I've got one in mine. So there's relative and absolute. The absolute truth is what you experience beyond the words. Words are relative truth. And with Vipassana, you're very much moving towards the experience of absolute truth. Ultimately, Vipassana becomes shunyata practice, becomes Mahamudra practice, becomes Dzogchen, great perfection practice. There's a wonderful essay on this, actually. There was a wonderful teacher who died. His name was Tulku Ujin. Some of you may know who he was. He was actually the father of some teachers who are abroad today who are wonderful teachers. Tsoknyi Rinpoche and Mingyur Rinpoche and Chikyi Rinpoche are all three the sons of Tulku Ujin. And Tulku Ujin was a great Dzogchen master. And there's a wonderful book that he wrote called Rainbow Painting. It's really powerful. And in it, there's an essay, one of the essays in that book, about how what we call Vipassana is just another name for the absolute ultimate practice, which in Dzogchen is called cutting through, trekchit. And in between, what happens is, you see, the practice doesn't really change. The practice is always resting awareness in space. What changes is the understanding that the practitioner has as the practice becomes more and more full, developed, real. And then, so what happens is that your understanding of who you are and what the world is evolving. And as it does, it has other names, like Shunyata, like Mahamudra, like Dzogchen, great perfection. And these names really are describing the way in which your understanding of who I am and what the world is changing, while the practice is just getting fuller and fuller, more relaxed, more real, more perfect. Same practice, Vipassana. The practice that we are doing here is awareness in space. Yes. And Leanne, awareness in space is absolute. Yes, well, it's everything. The absolute contains the relative, because in the space, these words arise, the gestures, all are just modulations of the space. You know? In the one of the contributions, there was a school in India that developed in the 7th century, named the Mind-Only School, or the Yogacara School. And it was founded by a great teacher named Asanga. It's a wonderful story, actually. Asanga made these great discoveries, and he founded this school of Buddhism. And then he converted his own brother. His brother was a Hinayanist, a great Hinayanist, Vasubandhu. He wrote one of the most important Hinayana psychological texts called the Abhidharmakosha. And Asanga converted his brother into the Mahayana. and one of their contributions was that they distinguished 3 levels of reality, understanding, whatever you want to call it. The first level is absolute, and that's called the Parinishpana in Sanskrit. The second level is Paratantra in Sanskrit, and it means relative truth. And the relative and the absolute truth are in union, because the relative is constantly arising and passing away in space. And so there's this famous slogan that goes, and I've said this many times because I just love it: things arise, and yet they do not exist. They don't exist, and yet they arise. See, the non-existence is the absolute quality, and the arising is the relative. And the arising and the non-existence are happening, they're in union. As soon as something is arising, it's dying. The third level is called the parikalpita. And what that means is that's error. That's what makes us confused. That's when we take the words to be real. That's when we start living I and the table, me and my table. And then we get lost in confusion. That's parikalpita. Quick introduction to Yogacara. All of that the whole thing about those 3 levels passed all the way up into Chögyam. There are other things that the Yogacharans contributed which were rejected. Sort of. They were pretty terrific, though. You know, loves the Yogacharan stuff is Thich Nhat Hanh. When Vasubandhu, Asanga's brother, wrote, he wrote in verse, and then he would write commentary to his own verses. So there are these treatises, like the treatise on mind only in 20 stanzas, and the treatise on mind only in 30 stanzas. Now, what happened was that there was a great Chinese Buddhist who went to India in the 7th century. His name was Xuanzang. And he traveled overland, great adventure. There's a wonderful novel about it that was written much, much later called Monkey. And he went and he stayed in India for 18 years and taught as a student and then a teacher at Nalanda, great university. And then he went back to China by boat. Can you imagine making that trip? He almost got killed going to China. He was waylaid by his own guide who tried to kill him, and he escaped. And so he went back and he became a great translator of Chinese texts, a great translator of Sanskrit texts into Chinese. Then what happened was that a lot of Vasubandhu's work, almost all of it, disappeared. It's lost. except it exists in Xuanzang's translations in the Chinese. And you can read these today. And they are in verse when they're translated into English and Chinese both, and then with commentary. And Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a marvelous book called Understanding Our Mind, I think. I think that's the title of it. And it's, guess what? It's all about karma and how the mind works. And it's written in verse with a commentary. So that's his little tribute to Vasubandhu. He's really terrific, Thich Nhat Hanh. So learned and brilliant. Anyhow, anybody else? These are great questions. Tim, any more? Rolling around in there? More
No,
great.
that's a lot. Thank you so much, John. Really great stuff tonight.
Yeah, this is amazing material in these 2 chapters. You could study it over and over and over again to get the message to be kind to oneself. I mean, at least I could. It's so powerful for me, the kindness message. And it brings you much more into the present. And we're so hard on ourselves. Well, we should probably end.
Okay.
Anything else? Someone want to bring up? It's great to see you all. Let's do the dedication of merit. I'm going to put it up on the screen, and you can do it or not as you feel comfortable. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. I encourage you to come to this morning meditation if you have any inclination. One of the things about it is the people there converse with each other, and there's been a lot of bonding, and so it's amazing. A disparate group of people, most of whom have never seen each other face to face, and they're becoming friends. It's really lovely.
Is this the same Zoom?
Same Zoom.
New York Buddha.
Yeah, it's
Westchester. It's the New York Buddha Dharma.
It's on Westchester's site too. If you go to the Westchester Buddhist site to their links page, you'll find the link for this. But it's also the same link that got you in here.
Okay.
Right. And tomorrow is Tuesday, so we'll meet at 8 a.m. And you can come and go as you wish.
Thank you.
People leave early.
It's interesting that we're developing a global reach as well. There's an older gentleman from Brussels who comes almost every day. And we had a young lady from London who was like super charming. So,
Yeah, it's lovely.
it's not like we have billboards up or something. People just find their way into the room somehow.
Yeah, a few days ago we had a fellow from Italy too. And then there's a guy who comes up here once in a while to this group. His name is Kerry Idle, and he's from Australia. So it's fun. Okay, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
John.
Ciao, everyone. It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you, John. I needed that.
Thank you.
How?
Bye.
All right, thank you, John.
Okay.
Take care.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Leanne, what's wrong with your sound? I can't figure this out. You know, somewhere you've got settings on this computer that allow you to control the sound. Do you have a Mac? Shake your head yes or no. You do have a Mac. Okay, then in the dock, you will find an icon that looks like a gear. Okay? Or if you just go to the, move your cursor all the way up to the top of the screen and go to the apple on the left. And then you'll see a menu that drops down. Go to System Preferences. Okay, click on System Preferences. And then in System Preferences, we want to find sound. It's the 1, 2, 3rd line down in the center that says sound underneath. There's a picture of a megaphone. And you click on that. And then you click on Output. And or Input. Click on Input. And it should say MacBook Air microphone built in. Does it? That's what you want. You want the microphone, MacBook, whatever your computer is, a MacBook or something, microphone. And it should be, when you talk, you should see bars going across that show you that it's registering your sound.